In a cozy kitchen, Viola offered her husband, Cyrus, a heartfelt breakfast of his favorite pancakes, hoping to rekindle their closeness. Yet, his dismissive attitude and harsh words left her bewildered and hurt. As Cyrus departed for work, he left behind a somber atmosphere, prompting Viola to confront her insecurities and growing concerns about their relationship. The story takes a turn when Viola, plagued by mysterious phone calls and an unsettling encounter at her husband's office, decides to seek comfort from an old friend, Teresa. Their evening out brings Viola face to face with her past when she unexpectedly reunites with Roberto, her high school sweetheart. Amidst swirling emotions and a drink-induced haze, Viola is overwhelmed by memories of a love lost to time and circumstance. From the initial warmth of home to the melancholy of betrayal and the poignant reunion with a past love, Viola's journey is a vivid exploration of heartache, nostalgia, and the search for truth. If you are not subscribed, I recommend you subscribe and activate the bell to avoid missing any videos. Before we dive into this story, please let me know where you're watching from in the comments. Would you care for a cup of coffee? Viola inquired gently, her eyes brimming with warmth and hope. Cyrus, his expression distant and preoccupied, responded, "I'm not pressed for time. I plan to have breakfast once I reach the office." Viola studied her husband with a mix of concern and confusion. For what seemed like an eternity, Cyrus had been avoiding having breakfast at home, and she couldn't fathom the reason behind it. With a hopeful smile, Viola offered, "I've prepared a delightful breakfast for you. Your favorite pancakes. You've always adored them. Perhaps you could take them with you to the office." Her tone was infused with affectionate anticipation, wishing to bring a smile to her husband's face. However, her gesture fell flat, unmet by the response she longed for. Cyrus let out an exasperated sigh, his irritation palpable. "You always come up with these unrealistic ideas. I never take lunch with me to work. Do I look like a child carrying a lunchbox? Are you trying to make me a laughingstock? I know you probably don't give it much thought, but I'd advise you to be a bit more practical. Besides, I don't even like pancakes anymore. They're a relic of the past. We have a fantastic cafe nearby where I can get any healthy, nourishing meal I want. Pancakes are hardly a healthy option. You might want to reconsider indulging in them so often, or you'll end up with more issues with your figure than you currently have, Viola." Viola gazed at herself in bewilderment, scrutinizing her reflection from every angle. What could be wrong with her figure? She didn't appear overweight. Meanwhile, Ciro was busying himself with his expansive work bag, which housed essential documents and papers. He took a brief moment to assess his reflection in the mirror, meticulously smoothing out imaginary creases in his trousers and adjusting his tie. With a self-satisfied smile, he gathered his wallet, phone, and car keys without acknowledging his wife. With a curt farewell, he declared, "I'm heading out now. Don't expect me to return early today. We have a meeting, and the boss is likely to unleash his wrath. As the most dedicated and flawless employee, it's up to me to try and placate him." As Ciro departed, Viola remained by the window, her gaze following him as he walked away. Her finger traced the edge of her cup absent-mindedly, her eyes fixed on a distant point. Despite her husband's departure, she remained ensnared by his words. Had she truly let her figure go? Admittedly, she was no longer as lean and fit as she had been in her youth, but she was far from old, only 38. Yet, she recognized that her once active lifestyle had diminished since becoming a housewife. Her days were now filled with domestic chores and a growing sense of inactivity. Unlike other women who might spend hours in beauty salons to feel better about themselves, Viola found solace in the home beauty routines she performed. A sudden ring of the telephone startled Viola from her thoughts. She answered with a tentative, "Hello," but the line remained eerily silent. Frustration began to bubble within her. "Who is this? Why do you keep bothering me? If you call again, I'll report you, and they'll come after you," she threatened, her voice trembling with indignation. The line went dead, and she slammed the receiver onto the table with a burst of anger. She was fed up. What could they possibly want from her? She had mentioned these unsettling calls to her husband, but his response had been dismissive. "Don't let it bother you. There are too many foolish people in the world. Perhaps it's someone from work playing a prank. I have competitors who envy my reputation and would love to take my place. But that kind of success demands years of hard work. Don't let it get to you, Viola." Ciro had labored tirelessly to build his esteemed reputation. Medicine wasn't initially a lucrative field. It was a game of chance. Starting as a nurse, he worked night shifts in the emergency room while pursuing his studies at university. It wasn't the most glamorous job, but his determination never wavered. Eventually, he advanced to the role of an assistant and then a doctor upon graduating. Yet, the work environment was less than ideal. The pay was meager, the workload overwhelming, and there was little opportunity for growth within the hospital. It was during this period that he met Viola, a patient who would later become his wife. Viola fell deeply in love with the young surgeon, and he reciprocated her feelings. Their whirlwind romance led to a swift marriage. Ciro resigned from the hospital, and they relocated to a new city. This marked the beginning of Ciro's arduous journey as a physician, characterized by numerous job changes and ongoing challenges. They were far from content. Although being a surgeon held great promise, it only yielded results if you were in the right place, and Cyrus had yet to find that ideal position. Their financial situation was perpetually precarious, and the notion of having children seemed out of reach. Every time the topic arose, Cyrus's frustration was palpable. "What do you mean, children, Viola? Are you completely out of touch with reality? We can barely make ends meet as it is. If we were to have a child, you'd be on maternity leave, and what then? I can't work endlessly without rest. I'm not some automaton performing surgeries around the clock. Please, let's drop the subject of children. It just makes me irritable and brings me down. I'm already on edge, and your constant suggestions aren't helping." From that moment on, Viola ceased bringing up the topic. The couple clung to the hope of brighter days ahead. Viola stood by her husband with unwavering support, and Cyrus deeply appreciated her sacrifices. Not every wife would endure the struggles and hardships of her spouse, but Viola did so out of genuine love. After all, wasn't that the essence of marriage? 5 years ago, the tides began to turn. During a conference in another city, Ciro had the chance encounter that would change their lives. He met a distinguished surgeon, a renowned figure in the medical field. Though they were unfamiliar with each other, Ciro took a bold step and introduced himself. The young, confident surgeon reminded Ciro of his early days, when he had tirelessly worked to build his reputation and secure a prominent place in the medical world. The professor extended an offer for Ciro to relocate to the capital, where he could secure a prestigious position for him. Seizing this opportunity with fervor, Ciro didn't even pause to consult Viola. Her opinion was disregarded. He quit his job and they relocated to the capital, where the professor arranged for Viola to work at a renowned clinic. In no time, Ciro landed a prestigious role, and financial prosperity followed. Their lives transformed dramatically. They acquired a stunning mansion and luxurious cars. Viola was relieved of her work responsibilities, as Ciro preferred her to stay at home. She didn't resist. The bustling city intimidated her. She felt like an outsider, a provincial woman struggling to fit into the upper echelons of society. Ciro, on the other hand, thrived in the capital's dynamic environment. It was the fulfillment of a lifelong dream, and he reveled in his success. Viola snapped out of her reverie, shaking her head. "Why am I sitting here, wallowing in discontent? I need to find something meaningful to do." But what tasks remained for her when there was so little to occupy her time? The housekeeper came weekly, and cooking had become redundant. Cyrus rarely dined at home anymore, spending longer hours at work. When he did eat at home, he preferred takeout, eliminating the need for her culinary efforts. Although she often reminisced about their days of struggle, when she cooked regularly and Cyrus praised her culinary skills, things had changed. He had become increasingly distant and peculiar in his behavior. Viola even entertained the troubling thought that he might be seeing someone else, though there was no telltale sign of another woman's perfume on him, and he never called her by another name. it was more likely a figment of her anxious imagination. If you're still tuned into this video and find the story inspiring, drop a 1 in the comments to let me know you're still with me. Then, the phone rang once more, jolting Viola from her thoughts. Oh, for heaven's sake! This time it was Teresa, an old friend whom she hadn't seen in ages. Teresa had once worked at the beauty salon where Viola used to go for her manicures. Fortune had smiled upon her, and Viola's life took a turn for the better. She had married a wealthy man and retired from work, enjoying a more comfortable existence. Despite this, she maintained a close friendship with Teresa, her longtime confidant. Their friendship had endured, and they kept in touch regularly. Recently, Teresa had invited Viola out for dinner at a restaurant, but Viola was uncertain when Ciro would return home. To clarify her schedule, she decided to reach out to her husband. Anticipating that he might not answer his mobile phone, she called his office directly, hoping to catch him there. Instead, her call was answered by a young woman's voice. "Hello, I'm trying to reach Ciro," Viola said, her tone polite but puzzled. She hadn't anticipated the response that followed. "Oh my God! How do they even get these numbers? Who gave her this number? I've said time and again that this line is for employees only, not for random inquiries. They should be making appointments through the clinic, not trying to get free consultations over the phone. I'll have to address this with Emilio." Viola was taken aback. The girl on the other end was reprimanding her without knowing who was calling. "I'm sorry if I caused any confusion. I was given this number by my husband and told I could use it whenever necessary. I'm Ciro's wife." There was a brief, uncomfortable pause before the girl's tone softened. "Oh, I'm so sorry. I didn't recognize you. I didn't know it was you. I'll let Ciro know you called, and he'll return your call as soon as he can." The line went dead. Viola was left in stunned silence, trying to piece together what had just happened. What was with the rude behavior of this girl? Why was she so brusque, and what was her role in Ciro's office? The girl's familiarity with the clinic's owner and her casual demeanor raised red flags. Was her earlier suspicion of Ciro's infidelity resurfacing? Determined to find some clarity, Viola decided she needed to speak with Teresa. It was clear she needed a friend's perspective to help calm her troubled mind. She resolved to set aside her doubts about her husband and focus on her meeting with Teresa. That evening, Viola arrived at the restaurant by taxi, her anticipation mingled with unease. Teresa was already seated at a table, waiting eagerly. Her friend had undergone a noticeable transformation, her once slender figure now accentuated by a model-like elegance. The contrast between her previous job as a manicurist and her current, lavish lifestyle was striking. Teresa had effortlessly adapted to the comforts of wealth, savoring every luxury life offered. Despite her affluent new life, Teresa remained remarkably perceptive and resourceful, capable of finding solutions in the most challenging situations. When Teresa spotted Viola, she leaped up from her seat with infectious enthusiasm. "Oh, darling, I've missed you so much. I'm thrilled to see you. You have no idea. I'm ready to hug you until you can't breathe. I hope you're free tonight. I've got big plans for us." Her broad grin quickly shifted to a more serious expression. Viola chuckled. "Yes, I don't have my car tonight. I came by taxi as well. I'm here to unwind." Teresa's smile returned, and she clasped Viola's hands warmly. "Perfect. Everything is falling into place. I'm particularly fond of you tonight. Come, sit closer. By the way, I need to mention to the restaurant manager how wonderful these sofas are. It's been ages since I felt so comfortable, and this corner is perfect. No one will disturb us while we enjoy ourselves." Teresa's laughter was loud and genuine, and Viola couldn't help but smile. Her friend's vibrant energy was a stark contrast to her own more subdued demeanor. Despite the slight age difference, Teresa was 34 and Viola was 38. Teresa's vitality was palpable, while Viola often felt more restrained. It was curious how two such different women had forged such a strong bond, but their friendship thrived nonetheless. Teresa's exuberance and youthful spirit provided a refreshing counterpoint to Viola's more reserved, mature outlook. As the evening wore on, time seemed to slip away unnoticed. The two women dined and enjoyed 2 glasses of wine each. Teresa was the more animated of the two, recounting her active life with vivid detail. Viola listened, captivated by her friends' engaging stories. When the conversation eventually slowed, Teresa's gaze softened, and she addressed Viola with unexpected tenderness. "I can see something is troubling you, though you're not likely to bring it up yourself. But I can sense it. Something's not right. So, tell me what's going on. Are you dealing with health issues? Or is it something more personal, like depression?" Viola's meeting with Teresa had taken an unexpected turn. As she poured out her worries about Ciro, her intuition and suspicions were met with Teresa's practical advice. The idea of hiring a private detective seemed like a feasible solution, but Viola hesitated. The prospect of betraying her husband's trust and privacy weighed heavily on her, and the thought of spying on him felt like crossing an irrevocable line. Seeking some clarity, Viola decided to step outside for a breath of fresh air. The cool evening air was a welcome contrast to the stuffiness of the restaurant and the swirling confusion in her mind. As she wandered a few steps away from the entrance, trying to gather her thoughts, the sharp sound of her name cut through the night. "Viola, is that you?" She turned, her heart leaping at the familiar voice. Standing there, bathed in the soft glow of streetlights, was Roberto, her high school sweetheart, who had vanished from her life years ago, now stood before her, smiling widely. The shock of seeing him was so overwhelming that her knees nearly buckled. The years of separation melted away in an instant, and she was swept back into the past. "Roberto?" she exclaimed, her voice trembling with a mix of disbelief and excitement. Roberto's arms enveloped her in a warm embrace, and for a moment, Viola was transported to a time when life was simpler and her heart was full of youthful dreams. They had been inseparable in high school, their love the talk of their small town, only to be torn apart by circumstances beyond their control. Roberto, looking as handsome as ever, held her tightly and twirled her around, a gesture filled with both affection and the joy of this unexpected reunion. Viola laughed, tears welling in her eyes. The alcohol she had consumed added to the dizzying effect of the moment, and she found herself clinging to Roberto as if he were a lifeline pulling her from a sea of uncertainty. "I can't believe it," she said, pulling back slightly to look at him. "How did this happen? After all these years?" Roberto's grin widened. "It's unbelievable, isn't it? I'm just passing through the city for work, and here you are. It must be fate." Viola's mind was still spinning, and she felt a wave of emotions crashing over her. The excitement of this unexpected encounter, mixed with the alcohol and the earlier conversation with Teresa, made her head feel light and her thoughts scattered. "I'm so glad to see you, but I'm feeling a bit overwhelmed right now," Viola admitted, her voice unsteady. "I need to get some fresh air. Maybe we can talk tomorrow?" Roberto's face fell slightly, but he quickly recovered. "Of course, I'd love to catch up with you. Please, let's meet tomorrow. I'm looking forward to it." As they exchanged phone numbers and made plans for the next day, Viola felt a pang of guilt. The mention of her husband, Ciro, had briefly sobered her up. She was now acutely aware of her commitment to him and the promises they had made to each other. The idea of meeting Roberto again, even as an old friend, stirred up a mix of longing and discomfort. When she returned to the restaurant, Teresa was waiting, her face a mixture of concern and curiosity. Viola tried to shake off the feelings from the encounter, but her thoughts were still clouded with memories of Roberto. Teresa, perceptive as ever, noticed the shift in Viola's demeanor and asked, "Is everything all right? You seem a bit distracted." Viola forced a smile. "Yes, I'm fine. Just had a surprising encounter outside. It's a lot to take in." Teresa's eyes narrowed thoughtfully. "You know, you should consider what we talked about earlier. If you're feeling this way, it might be worth looking into things further. But if you decide against it, make sure you do what feels right for you." Viola nodded, though her mind was still racing. The evening's events had left her with more questions than answers. The chance meeting with Roberto had stirred old emotions and memories, and she wasn't sure how to reconcile this with her current life and marriage. The conversation with Teresa about hiring a detective felt like a distant concern compared to the personal upheaval she was experiencing. As Viola left the restaurant and took a taxi home, her thoughts were a jumble. The excitement of seeing Roberto, the lingering feelings of doubt about her marriage, and the unresolved issue of whether or not to hire a detective all swirled together, making it difficult for her to focus on anything. The comforting familiarity of Roberto's presence had momentarily alleviated her anxieties, but it also brought to the surface deeper fears and uncertainties. When she finally arrived home, the house was quiet. Ciro was not there, as usual, and the emptiness of the house felt heavy with the weight of her thoughts. Viola sat down on the edge of the bed, staring at the space where her husband should have been. The trust and intimacy that once defined their relationship now seemed to be overshadowed by doubts and suspicions. Viola's mind drifted to the conversation she had with Teresa and the advice about hiring a detective. She wondered if it was the right course of action or if it was a sign of something deeper that needed to be addressed. The idea of uncovering the truth, whether it confirmed her fears or dispelled them, seemed both daunting and necessary. She sighed deeply, feeling the exhaustion of the day catch up with her. The emotions, the decisions, and the uncertainty were all weighing on her. Viola knew she needed to confront her feelings and make a choice about how to proceed. But for now, all she could do was let the night's events settle in her mind and hope that clarity would come with the morning light. Viola's meeting with Roberto had transformed into an emotional whirlwind, a stark contrast to the routine of her daily life. She woke up late the next morning, her husband already gone. When she had returned home the previous night, Ciro had not yet arrived, and Viola had fallen into a restless sleep, unaware of his late arrival. The message he had sent, informing her of his plans to meet a friend, felt like a distant echo of indifference. Viola had read the message but had not replied, feeling the sting of his disregard. The day passed in a blur. Viola found herself changing outfits several times, fretting over her appearance, and trying to decide how to style her hair. The act felt absurd in its significance, as if she were preparing for a grand occasion rather than a simple dinner with an old friend. Her self-reproach grew as she realized how she was treating the evening like a high-stakes date. She chided herself, attempting to refocus on the reality of her situation. Eventually, pressed for time, she settled on an outfit and hurried out the door, late for her meeting with Roberto. The taxi ride felt interminable. Traffic snarls seemed to mock her impatience, and she fretted about being excessively late. To her surprise, she arrived at the restaurant 15 minutes early. Roberto, however, was already seated, looking just as eager to reconnect. His warm smile and open arms were a comforting reminder of the past, and as he embraced her, it was as if no time had passed at all. If you're still tuned into this video and find the story inspiring, drop a 2 in the comments to let me know you're still with me. The restaurant's ambience was cozy, and as they settled into their seats, the initial tension gave way to familiar ease. They ordered their meals and began to catch up, sharing stories about their lives since high school. Roberto's mention of Viola's husband and his status as single seemed to underline an unspoken comparison. His gaze, direct and intense, unsettled Viola, making her feel as if his eyes could pierce through to her deepest emotions. As they sipped their wine and reminisced about their youth, the conversation flowed more freely. They laughed about their school days and the silly things they had done, and Viola felt a profound sense of nostalgia and comfort. Being with Roberto was like coming home, a feeling she hadn't realized she missed so deeply. However, the warmth of their reunion was interrupted by an awkward silence. Roberto's sudden question broke the quiet. "Have you ever thought about how our lives would have been if we hadn't broken up?" Viola's heart skipped a beat, and she struggled to maintain her composure. "But what is there to think about? We didn't succeed. Why should I dwell on what could have been?" Roberto's gaze remained fixed on her. "We had plans, dreams for the future. We broke up not by choice, and I've been thinking about it ever since." "I can't believe you haven't." Viola looked away, her emotions a tumultuous mix of regret and unresolved feelings. She had often wondered about a different path, one where Roberto was a part of her life. But she had chosen Ciro, and despite the recent doubts and suspicions about her marriage, she had committed herself to that choice. Her love for Roberto, once a profound force in her life, had faded into a distant memory, overshadowed by the reality of her current situation. "Roberto," she sighed, "you're right. Things could have been different, but they are what they are now. There's no use in speculating about an alternate past. I'm happy to have seen you and relived our memories, but that's all they are now, memories." Roberto's face paled slightly, and his voice dropped to a whisper. "Viola, I don't want to forget anything. I never stopped loving you. You are the only one for me. I didn't marry because no one could replace you. I believe we were brought back together for a reason. I can't let this chance slip away." Viola's heart raced. The intensity in Roberto's voice, his earnest declaration, and the emotional weight of his words left her stunned. She tried to articulate her feelings, her voice trembling. "Roberto, I'm married. That's the reality. I don't know what else to say." His eyes were filled with a mix of hope and desperation. "Viola, please think about what I've said. You seem unhappy. I can see it in your face. It's not about money or health. It's deeper than that. You need to be heard and understood. I can offer you happiness and a future together. I love you. Do you hear me? I truly love you." The weight of Roberto's words, combined with the unresolved feelings she harbored, created a storm of conflicting emotions inside Viola. The dinner had started as a chance to reconnect with an old friend, but it had evolved into a confrontation with her own heart's desires and her current life's dissatisfaction. The evening wore on, and as they finished their meal, the conversation became more subdued. Roberto's confession hung heavy between them, leaving Viola with much to contemplate. They parted ways with a promise to stay in touch, but the future felt uncertain and fraught with implications. Viola left the restaurant, her thoughts swirling with the weight of the choices she faced. The encounter with Roberto had rekindled a spark of longing and nostalgia, but had also brought into sharp focus the discontent and confusion in her present life. As she walked through the night, she grappled with the decision before her. Whether to confront the issues in her marriage, explore the possibility of rekindling her past with Roberto, or find a new path forward on her own. The night was quiet, and the streets were bathed in the soft glow of streetlights, offering a moment of solitude for Viola to reflect on the complex web of emotions and decisions that lay ahead. Viola sat quietly as Roberto's words echoed in her mind. His earnest confession and the intensity of his feelings left her feeling both emotional and conflicted. She watched as he squeezed her hand, and her eyes welled up with tears. The reality of her situation hit hard. She couldn't walk away from her marriage and the life she had built with Ciro. "It's over, Roberto. It's too late. I can't leave my husband. We've been through so much together, and we trust each other. I can't just walk away because you reached out to me. I'm not that kind of person, and you know it." Roberto's eyes softened with understanding, but there was an unmistakable sadness. "I know you're not that kind of person. I love you too much to force you into anything. I want you to make this decision yourself. Just promise me that you'll think about what I've said. I'll give you all my contact details, wherever I am, in any city or country. If you ever change your mind, call me, and I'll come to get you from anywhere in the world." Viola swallowed hard, fighting back her tears. The goodbye was heavy with unspoken words and emotional weight. As she climbed into the taxi and watched Roberto's figure recede, she realized that her thoughts were more about her current life and her husband than about what might have been with Roberto. They had parted on an emotional note, but Viola knew she had to confront her reality. Her trust in Ciro and the life they had built together was at stake, and she needed to uncover the truth about his fidelity. Back home, Viola dialed Teresa's number. Her voice was steady but tinged with resolve. "Hi, Teresa. I've thought about your offer. I need the phone number of the detective you mentioned. I want to know everything. I'm tired of living in uncertainty." The next day, Viola met with the detective, Giorgio. The office was inconspicuous, tucked away in a nondescript building with no sign to indicate its purpose. The place seemed deliberately hidden, a detail that intrigued Viola. As she walked in, she noted the lack of any visible advertisements, suggesting that Giorgio operated on a word-of-mouth basis. Viola took a seat in front of Giorgio's desk. The room was sparsely furnished, and Giorgio himself was seated behind a desk with only a thin black folder and a pen. She felt a pang of discomfort in the stark, utilitarian setting. Giorgio, initially distant, was observant. Viola noticed him scrutinizing her, perhaps assessing whether she was a serious client. Despite Teresa's assurance, Giorgio seemed to weigh her worth as a potential case. His experience had taught him to be selective, but something about Viola, her earnestness and the shadow of sadness in her eyes, struck a chord. "Nice to meet you, Giorgio," Viola said cautiously. "Nice to meet you," Giorgio replied, his tone neutral but not unkind. After a moment, he prompted her, "Why don't you start by telling me why you need to hire a detective? We'll take it from there." Viola took a deep breath. "I need to find out if my husband is cheating on me." Giorgio's face betrayed a fleeting smile, one that he quickly masked. "That's a common request. Please tell me what leads you to suspect this, if you have any evidence, and provide any details you think are relevant, such as your husband's personal information, work schedule, and other pertinent details." Viola began to recount her concerns. She detailed Ciro's recent behaviors, her feelings of unease, and specific instances that had raised her suspicions. Giorgio listened intently, taking notes without interruption. Viola spoke at length, her voice occasionally faltering as she struggled to maintain composure. When her throat grew dry, Giorgio produced a canteen and a glass, offering them to her. Viola gratefully took a sip of water, which gave her the strength to continue. As she spoke, she felt a bit of relief, realizing that Giorgio's professional demeanor and attentiveness were helping her navigate through her turmoil. After Viola finished, Giorgio closed his folder and set his pen down. "You've been thorough, and you've given me all the information I need. I appreciate your clarity and detail. You've covered everything necessary for me to start." Viola exhaled, a mixture of relief and anxiety in her expression. "So, what's the next step? And what about payment?" Giorgio smiled lightly. "It'll require a small advance to begin the investigation. The remainder will be settled once our work is complete." He scribbled a note in his small notebook, tore off the sheet, and handed it to Viola. Viola glanced at the paper, surprised at the modest sum. "That's all? I was led to believe your services were quite expensive. I expected the advance to be higher." Giorgio's eyes twinkled with a hint of nostalgia. "The amount is reasonable. I know how difficult this situation must be for you, and I believe in helping people when I can. Consider it a token of good faith. If you need anything else, don't hesitate to call." Viola nodded, feeling a strange mix of gratitude and apprehension. She left the office, clutching the note with Giorgio's contact details, and wondered about the journey ahead. The truth about her marriage was now in someone else's hands, and the uncertainty she had lived with for so long was finally on the cusp of being resolved. Viola left Giorgio's office feeling a strange mix of relief and trepidation. The detective's calm and somewhat detached demeanor had helped to allay her immediate financial concerns about the investigation. His understated fee, though surprising, did little to ease the knot of anxiety tightening in her chest. The office had felt oppressive, with its closed windows and lack of any personal touches, as if Giorgio was intent on keeping his work environment as isolated and insular as possible. As she stepped out onto the street, she drew a deep breath of fresh air, feeling momentarily unburdened by the stifling atmosphere of the office. Yet, her sense of relief was fleeting. The pressure of her ongoing concerns weighed heavily on her mind. She had been so absorbed in her crisis that she had completely overlooked her husband's upcoming birthday. How could she have forgotten such a significant occasion? The realization hit her hard, and she shook her head, scolding herself for letting her troubles overshadow her responsibilities. Sliding into her car, Viola noticed that Ciro was already home. His early arrival was unusual. As she entered the house, she was greeted by the sight of her husband sitting in the living room, looking tired but somewhat relieved to be home. She raised an eyebrow in surprise. Wow, you're home early today. I hope nothing happened. Ciro looked up, his expression unreadable. What do you mean? Is something wrong if I get home on time? Viola, trying to navigate the delicate terrain of their strained communication, continued, No, I just wondered if there was a problem or something. Ciro's tone became brusque. The surgery was cancelled because the patient had complications. We had to reschedule until they're better. Viola's curiosity, combined with concern, led her to press further. And what complications does the patient have? Ciro's irritation flared. Why do you need to know all these details? You don't understand medicine. Why should I explain something you won't grasp? What's with the interrogation, Viola? You're starting to bother me. Viola's heart sank at his harsh tone. She felt a pang of hurt. But you used to share things with me. We used to talk and communicate. Has that changed so much that I can't ask anything? Are you hiding something from me? Ciro's anger seemed to wane, replaced by a more measured, though weary tone. You're imagining things. I'm not doing anything illegal. I'm just really tired. I work almost every weekend with very little free time. When I get home, I need a break. I don't feel like talking much. Viola, trying to manage her frustration, replied softly. I understand that you're tired, but it feels like we're drifting apart. We used to talk about everything. Maybe we should try to reconnect and communicate more. Ciro remained silent, and Viola sighed, feeling a mix of sadness and resignation. Forget the arguments for now. I needed to bring up something important. Your birthday is this Saturday. Do you have any plans? If you're still tuned into this video and find the story inspiring, drop a 3 in the comments to let me know you're still with me. Ciro's face softened slightly. We'll spend the day together. I invited some colleagues from the clinic. Emilio can't make it, but everyone else will be there. We'll have a party. Viola was taken aback by the sudden revelation. When were you planning to tell me? Would I have found out when the guests arrived? Ciro, somewhat defensive, responded, Calm down. I've taken care of everything. The food is ordered, and the table is set. I just need you to handle the cleaning service and any last-minute preparations. Viola felt a pang of surprise and confusion. It was unusual for Ciro to take over the planning of such events. It was usually her role to manage these details, and the shift in responsibility felt jarring. She tried to process the change. Despite her mixed emotions, Viola decided to focus on the party preparations. She scheduled a visit to a beauty salon, wanting to make sure she looked her best for the occasion. She underwent a dye job and a trim, and had her nails done in a bold red polish. She even opted for eyelash extensions, though she chose a natural effect. It was a departure from her usual routine, but she hoped her efforts would be appreciated by Ciro and the guests. On the eve of Ciro's birthday, Viola met with Teresa, who couldn't hide her admiration. Well, my friend, you look stunning. I've never seen you so radiant. You've outdone yourself. Now all you need is the perfect dress. Viola smiled, feeling a sense of accomplishment. I have a dress I bought last year but haven't worn yet. I think it will complement my new look perfectly. Teresa's approval was evident. You look fantastic. Have you heard from the detective yet? Viola's smile faltered. No news so far. He should call by the middle of next week. I'm feeling quite anxious, Teresa. What if the investigation reveals something I'm not prepared for? Teresa placed a comforting hand on Viola's arm. Try to stay positive. The detective will get back to you with the information you need. For now, focus on enjoying the party and celebrating Ciro's birthday. You deserve to find some joy amid all this uncertainty. Viola nodded, grateful for her friend's support. As she prepared for the celebration, she hoped that the upcoming days would bring clarity and answers, both about her marriage and the unexpected twists in her life. She couldn't shake the feeling that the truth, whatever it might be, was looming just around the corner, ready to disrupt the fragile balance she was trying to maintain. With her preparations complete, she set her mind on the party and tried to push her worries aside, hoping that the celebration would bring some much-needed respite and perhaps a glimpse of normalcy amid her turbulent emotions. Nervously, Viola hoped that the detective wouldn't bring her bad news. She tried to reassure herself, "Viola, that's life. You can face anything. But I think everything will turn out okay, and you're worrying for no reason." Teresa's comforting words echoed in her mind. Despite Teresa's attempt to ease her anxiety, Viola's heart was restless. She had been preparing herself for the worst, but a small part of her clung to the hope that the detective's report would not uncover anything troubling. The thought of potentially facing harsh truths was almost unbearable. Saturday arrived with a mix of excitement and dread. Viola had been so absorbed in her preparations that she barely had time to reflect on her feelings. The day unfolded as Ciro had promised. Everything was organized to perfection. The house was a hive of activity, with guests arriving and the air filled with the clinking of glasses and cheerful chatter. Viola's role was to ensure everything ran smoothly, from coordinating with the caterers to managing the flow of guests. The preparations for the night were hectic but familiar. The chaos of setting up and the hustle of last-minute details were all part of the routine for such events. Yet, despite the buzz of activity, Viola couldn't shake her unease. She had never been comfortable in the spotlight, and the thought of hosting a party where she knew no one was unsettling. The idea of mingling with strangers, especially when she was already feeling vulnerable, was daunting. When the guests began to fill the room, Viola felt a pang of insecurity. She was unsure why Ciro had chosen to host the party at home instead of a restaurant, a more neutral and less personal setting. The intimacy of their home, combined with the unfamiliar faces, only heightened her discomfort. Ciro seemed to be in his element, moving confidently among the guests, laughing and engaging with ease. Viola took a moment to step away from the crowd and retreated to the bedroom to catch her breath. As she looked at her reflection in the mirror, she couldn't help but feel a wave of self-doubt. She had hoped to shine in her dress, but now, surrounded by the glitz of the other guests' outfits, her own seemed plain and uninspired. She had envisioned herself as the star of the evening, but compared to the dazzling dresses of the other women, she felt overshadowed. Ciro's earlier comment about her eyelash extensions had stung. His blunt critique, calling her look cheap and likening her to a doll from an antique store, had wounded her deeply. Viola had tried to brush it off, but the hurt lingered. She felt a strong urge to tear off her jewelry, rip off the dress, and erase all traces of makeup. Yet, she restrained herself, knowing that making a scene would only draw unwanted attention and exacerbate her feelings of inadequacy. As she composed herself and left the bedroom, she rejoined the party. The living room was lively, with music playing and laughter ringing out. Viola scanned the room, trying to familiarize herself with the faces around her. That's when she noticed her husband talking animatedly with a new guest, a strikingly beautiful young woman who had recently arrived. The girl's presence was almost magnetic. Her long, flowing black hair, tan skin, and slim figure made her stand out in the crowd. Her dress was daringly revealing, with a deep neckline and an open back that left little to the imagination. Ciro was captivated, his attention fully absorbed by the young woman. The girl, whose name Viola would soon learn was Alba, was laughing and leaning in close, her body language flirtatious and intimate. Viola's heart sank as she observed the interaction. The way Alba's dress clung to her and the provocative way she carried herself seemed to signal more than just casual conversation. Unable to contain her curiosity and growing unease, Viola approached Ciro. "Who is she?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. Ciro looked at her with a hint of confusion, though it seemed more like he was hiding something. "What are you talking about? You know who I mean. The dark-haired girl you were talking to," Viola pressed. "Ah, she works at our clinic. She's a doctor," Ciro replied nonchalantly. Viola raised an eyebrow. "And what's her name?" Ciro's expression tightened. "Why do you need her name? She's just a colleague. Why are you so interested?" Viola's concern deepened. Her age seems unusual for someone in a prestigious position. She looks so young. Ciro's irritation was evident. "I don't know her exact age. Probably around 23 or 25. Why does it matter? Can we focus on something else?" Viola studied Ciro's reaction. There was something off about his behavior. He seemed unusually defensive and nervous. The whole situation felt increasingly suspicious, and Viola couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to the story. As the party continued, Viola observed Alba closely. The young woman was well respected among the guests, receiving nods and smiles from everyone. She was engaged in conversations with various people, her demeanor confident and commanding. Viola also noticed that Alba seemed to be checking her watch frequently, her eyes darting around the room as if she were waiting for something or someone. This behavior added another layer of intrigue to the already puzzling situation. What was Alba's role in all of this? Why was she the center of so much attention? The evening dragged on, and Viola felt increasingly out of place. She tried to engage with the guests, but her attempts felt forced. The more she observed Alba and Ciro, the more anxious she became. She couldn't ignore the nagging feeling that something was amiss. As the night progressed, Viola found herself increasingly torn between her desire to confront Ciro and her fear of causing a scene. The detective's call was still pending, and she was caught between her unease about Ciro's behavior and the looming uncertainty of what the investigation would reveal. The party, which was meant to celebrate Ciro's birthday, had become a backdrop for her growing anxiety and confusion. Viola stood alone in the dimly lit living room, her mind racing with confusion and hurt. The night had turned out to be vastly different from what she had envisioned. Her husband's dismissive attitude and unexpected lateness only added to her growing unease. The elegant lingerie she had hoped would rekindle their intimacy now seemed like a symbol of her failed attempt to reconnect with Ciro. As Ciro, tired and indifferent, made his way to the bedroom, Viola's frustration mounted. She had put so much effort into preparing a special surprise for him, hoping it would bridge the emotional gap that had been widening between them. Yet his indifference made her feel as though her efforts were in vain. The vibrant and lively atmosphere of the party seemed like a world away now, replaced by the stark reality of her isolation. She took a deep breath, her chest rising and falling with the effort to calm herself. Her doubts and insecurities, long simmering beneath the surface, bubbled up like an uncontrollable torrent. Ciro's strange behavior, combined with his secretive nature, left her feeling like a stranger in her own life. The excitement and energy of the party had quickly faded into a sense of being left behind, abandoned in her own home. Desperately trying to regain her composure, Viola decided she needed a moment to process her feelings. She paced the room, her mind racing through every interaction from the night, replaying them over and over. Her suspicions about Ciro's fidelity gnawed at her, fueled by his odd behavior and the unexplained presence of Alba. Each detail seemed to fit together like pieces of a puzzle, but she couldn't quite see the full picture. She glanced at the clock, its ticking echoing in the silent room. It was well past 3 a.m., and the stillness seemed to amplify her feelings of isolation. With a sigh, she turned to the bedroom, where Ciro was already lying down. His exhaustion was evident in the way his body relaxed into the mattress, his breathing deep and steady. Viola felt a pang of guilt for disturbing him, but her need for answers outweighed her concerns for his rest. As she walked into the room, she made an effort to push aside her hurt feelings and focus on what truly mattered. The issues between them were significant, but reacting impulsively or letting her emotions dictate her actions would only worsen the situation. She needed to approach the matter with clarity and resolve, something she felt she was losing grip on in the wake of Ciro's late-night escapade. Gently, she lay beside him, careful not to disturb his rest. The bed seemed unusually cold and unwelcoming, a stark contrast to the warmth she had hoped to share. She stared up at the ceiling, her mind filled with thoughts of what had transpired. The thought of confronting him now seemed too daunting, but she knew she couldn't let this moment slip away without addressing her concerns. Viola's thoughts drifted to the surprise she had prepared. The lingerie, which she had carefully chosen, was meant to be a gesture of affection, a way to rekindle their connection. But Ciro's response had been dismissive, his weariness a sharp reminder of the emotional distance that had grown between them. As she lay there, a wave of realization washed over her. She needed to confront her feelings, not just for the sake of her marriage but for her mental well-being. The constant suspicions and insecurities were taking a toll on her, driving her to the brink of hysteria. She knew she needed to seek help, perhaps from a therapist or counselor, to address the anxieties that were clouding her judgment. Her fears of Ciro's infidelity, while not unfounded, seemed to be distorting her perception of reality. Men who cheat typically exhibit signs of anxiety and evasiveness, but Ciro's calm demeanor and casual attitude suggested that he was, indeed, relaxed and at ease. The realization that her anxieties might be overshadowing the reality of her situation was both frightening and enlightening. As the minutes ticked by, Viola resolved to wait for Ciro to awaken fully. She would approach him with her concerns when he was more awake and receptive, hoping to find clarity and understanding. For now, she needed to rest and gather her strength. The issues between them wouldn't resolve themselves overnight, but with patience and honest communication, she hoped they could find a way back to the closeness they once shared. Viola finally closed her eyes, trying to push away the tumult of thoughts and emotions. As she drifted into a restless sleep, she clung to the hope that tomorrow would bring a new opportunity for resolution and reconciliation. The night had been a challenging one, but she was determined to face whatever lay ahead with courage and clarity. In the quiet of the early morning, Viola's heart ached with a mixture of hope and anxiety. She knew that the road ahead would be difficult, but she was prepared to confront the truth, whatever it might be. And with that, she surrendered to the sleep she so desperately needed, hoping that when she awoke, she would have the strength to face the challenges that lay ahead with renewed resolve. Viola sighed deeply as she looked around the dimly lit house. The emptiness felt almost tangible, and she couldn't shake the overwhelming sense of loneliness that had settled over her. The house, once a place of comfort and warmth, now seemed like a cold, unwelcoming space. She longed for the solace of someone's embrace, the feeling of being needed and loved. The weight of her anxiety was almost unbearable. It was impossible to remain on edge all the time. The constant stress was driving her to the brink of insanity. She felt like she couldn't stand it any longer. If you're still tuned into this video and find the story inspiring, drop a 4 in the comments to let me know you're still with me. With a heavy heart, Viola drank some water, the cold liquid providing a brief respite from her turmoil. She placed the glass on the table with a soft clink. The silence of the house was suddenly broken by a loud sound, making her jump. Her nerves were already frayed, and the unexpected noise only heightened her sense of unease. Wrapped tightly in her robe, which offered little warmth but some semblance of comfort, she approached the window, hoping to find something that would ground her. She looked out, but there was nothing outside except the distant barking of a dog. She sighed again, her breath fogging up the cold window pane. The chill in the air matched the coldness she felt inside. She couldn't calm down or get warm, no matter how hard she tried. The night had been too long, and the anxiety gnawed at her from within. She decided to go to bed, hoping that sleep would offer some relief. She would take a sleeping pill and lie down next to her husband, who was already sound asleep. In the morning, she would put on a brave face and smile at him, waiting for his attention. But deep down, she was uncertain of what she truly wanted. It felt as though a resolution was imminent, as if she had a premonition that something significant was about to happen. When morning came, Viola woke with a start, disoriented by the late hour. Her head pounded. Whether from the pills, the sleepless night, or the weight of her worries, she couldn't tell. She reached for the glass of water on the nightstand, trying to quench her thirst and stave off the lingering effects of the sleeping pills. She glanced at the clock and frowned. It was already noon. She had never slept so late. The realization that her husband had already left for the day hit her hard. The sleeping pills had done their job, but they had also contributed to her feeling of being out of sync with the world. As she sat up, Viola noticed her phone on the bedside table, its screen flashing with missed calls and messages. Her heart skipped a beat when she saw the name of Giorgio, the detective she had hired to keep an eye on her husband. There were 10 missed calls and 5 messages from him. Panic surged through her. Giorgio must have had something important to tell her if he had called so many times. Quickly shaking off the remaining drowsiness, Viola dialed Giorgio's number. The phone rang and rang, each ring heightening her anxiety. Finally, Giorgio answered, his voice calm but carrying an unsettling undertone. I see you're anxious for news, Viola. Good morning, or rather, good afternoon, Giorgio said, his tone slightly mocking but controlled. Viola's voice trembled as she spoke. Hi, Giorgio. I'm so sorry for missing your calls. I was busy, and I must have fallen asleep with my phone on silent. I just saw your messages and called you back right away. Giorgio chuckled, but something was disconcerting about his laugh. It was the laugh of someone who knew too much. Viola, you seem to have forgotten who you're talking to. Let me remind you, I'm a detective and I keep tabs on everyone, from ordinary people to the most prominent figures. I've been parked outside your house since 7 a.m. I saw your husband leave, and I noticed you haven't left or entered the house until now. That means you've been home all this time. Unless, of course, you weren't home, but that would be unusual. Your husband's demeanor suggested that you were here, as he left in good spirits. A chill ran down Viola's spine. Giorgio's words seemed to penetrate deeper than she had anticipated. She shuddered and replied, Yes, you're correct. I was sleeping. I took sleeping pills and didn't wake up until now. I apologize for the confusion. Don't apologize, Giorgio said smoothly. You don't owe me any apologies. I just wanted to illustrate that even the smallest lie can be uncovered. Always be careful. Either don't lie, or ensure that your lies are worth the risk. Viola felt a strange mixture of fear and fascination as she listened to Giorgio's words. His voice was hypnotic, almost mesmerizing. She found herself absorbed in the conversation, her earlier panic subsiding into a strange calm. She took a deep breath and exhaled slowly. Let's move past this. I believe you understand the importance of honesty now. I'm ready to discuss the findings of your investigation. I've gathered enough information and am eager to move on to the next case. I'll meet you in the car in half an hour. That should give you enough time to freshen up. I'll bring some excellent coffee to help you wake up and get ready. Giorgio's voice softened, carrying a hint of approval. I'll be waiting outside. Take your time, Viola. We can discuss everything in detail once we meet. Viola ended the call, her mind racing with thoughts of the upcoming meeting. She felt a renewed sense of purpose as she prepared to face the challenges ahead. Despite the tumult of emotions she had experienced, she was determined to find clarity and resolution. As she moved through the house, preparing to meet Giorgio, she couldn't shake the feeling that a significant change was on the horizon, and she needed to be ready for whatever lay ahead. Viola looked out the window, her gaze scanning the quiet street. There were no cars in sight, and the stillness only deepened her sense of isolation. What a peculiar person Giorgio was. Yet, her mind was not focused on his eccentricities but on the pressing matter at hand. What had the detective discovered about her husband? Would the information spell the end of her marriage, or would it simply confirm her fears of deceit? The anticipation was almost unbearable, and she was eager to learn the truth, whatever it might be. Determined to get some clarity, Viola quickly headed to the shower. The hot water provided a brief moment of relief, washing away the grime of sleeplessness and anxiety. She emerged 20 minutes later, feeling somewhat rejuvenated. Her headache had eased, and she felt a bit more grounded. After preparing a strong cup of coffee, she glanced around the house, trying to shake off the lingering discomfort. As she sipped her coffee, she noticed a car parked a short distance away. The headlights flickered briefly before the car moved, pulling up right next to her. The front door of the car opened, and Giorgio stepped out, his demeanor calm and collected. Viola took a deep breath and made her way to the vehicle, where Giorgio greeted her with a smile. "Well, hello, Viola. You look lovely," he said, his tone warm but carrying an edge of formality. Viola frowned, her anxiety returning. "Have you figured out everything I asked you about? I haven't had breakfast yet. Let's go somewhere where I can grab something quick, and you can go through my materials without interruptions." Giorgio nodded, a glint of amusement in his eyes. "Of course. Let's head to a place where we can talk in peace." 25 minutes later, they were seated at a small table in a discreet cafe favored by students for its quick and affordable bites. The cafe was cozy and unpretentious, a stark contrast to the tension that Viola felt. They settled into a corner where they were less likely to be noticed, and Giorgio went to fetch their food. When he returned, he carried a tray laden with pastries and coffee, setting it down before Viola with a careful hand. He then placed a folder with documents in front of her, the edges of the folder worn from use. Viola took a deep breath, feeling the weight of anticipation as she opened the folder. Inside, she found a collection of handwritten notes, meticulously organized. The detective's choice to use paper rather than a computer struck her as odd. Perhaps it was an attempt to add a personal touch or to give the information a sense of gravity. Along with the notes were several photographs of varying quality. With trembling hands, Viola picked up the first photograph. It showed her in a white medical suit, standing at the entrance of a clinic. Beside her was a girl with long black hair, engaged in conversation. Ciro, her husband, was visible in the background, smiling at the woman. Viola's heart raced as she moved to the next photo, where the girl, now wearing large black glasses, was looking almost directly at the camera. Viola couldn't place her. The woman was unfamiliar. The subsequent photograph showed Ciro alone in a restaurant. A long red rose was placed on the table next to him. His thoughtful expression suggested he was waiting for someone. The next photo confirmed her growing suspicion. It was taken in the same cafe where she and Giorgio were sitting, but this time Ciro was at a table with the same dark-haired woman. The woman's face was unmistakable. Alba, an employee at Ciro's clinic. She was wearing a revealing dress that highlighted her artificial breasts and holding a rose with a tender smile. Viola's eyes widened in shock as she looked at Giorgio, who was quietly enjoying his breakfast. "She's a doctor at my husband's clinic," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Giorgio looked up, his expression unreadable. He took a sip of water before responding. "She does not work at the clinic." "What do you mean she doesn't work there?" "Ciro told me she was a doctor at the clinic," Viola said, her frustration evident. "I understand, but it's not true," Giorgio replied, his gaze intense. "Although she is connected to the clinic, it's not in the way you might think. Alba is the wife of Emilio Navarro, the owner of the clinic." A stunned silence settled between them. Viola stared at the photograph of Alba again, her mind racing. Ciro was cheating on her. He had brought this woman into their home without a shred of fear that Viola might discover their affair. Giorgio leaned back in his chair, continuing to speak. "Alba is 23 years old. Your husband has been in a relationship with her for 2 years. This affair is well concealed. These photos were taken in a VIP room of a restaurant, a place where no outsiders are allowed. How I obtained these photos is my business. What matters is that your husband and Alba have been involved for a long time. It's a fact." "He doesn't." Giorgio's words cut off, and he took a moment to sip his coffee, then continued. "He doesn't know about Alba's double life, and apparently you didn't either. They frequently spend time together at a hotel, maintaining complete discretion. Emilio travels often, and when he's away, your husband visits Alba at her home. I have photos of these visits. Your husband is dressed up in them, but I'm sure you'll recognize him." Viola picked up the next photograph, her hands shaking. It showed a taxi pulling up in front of a large mansion, and Ciro, wearing a sun cap, was stepping out of the car. The detective's earlier claims seemed to be validated. She examined the following photo, which showed Ciro in a fashion store, holding a dress and a shopping bag. The same dress was visible in another photo, worn by Alba at Viola's own house. The final photo was from the previous Saturday, during a party with friends. Viola recalled Ciro's explanation from that day. He had said Emilio organized a party, that they were going to a nightclub, and that only guests could attend. Viola had been left behind, isolated and confused. As she absorbed the gravity of the situation, Viola's voice trembled as she whispered. Ciro said that Emilio organized a party, that they were going to a nightclub, and that only invitation tickets were allowed. They wouldn't let me in. Giorgio's gaze was steady, his voice sympathetic but firm. It appears your husband has been leading a double life, hiding a significant secret from you. The evidence is clear. You now have the choice of how to proceed. The weight of Giorgio's revelations hung heavy in the air. Viola felt a mix of shock, betrayal, and a deep sense of betrayal. The morning's events had turned her world upside down, and she knew that whatever choices lay ahead would shape her future in ways she could barely comprehend. The detective's ironic smile held a tinge of sympathy, though it did little to soften the blow of his revelations. Your husband cheated on you, and you didn't realize it. They did go to the nightclub together, but contrary to what Ciro told you, he organized the party himself, not Emilio. It was open to the public. No invitation tickets were required, and Ciro didn't stay there long. Half an hour later, he left with Alba to a hotel where they stayed almost until morning. Viola, your husband spent the entire night with his lover. As soon as he left the hotel, I printed the photos and came straight to your house. Viola felt as if the ground had been pulled out from beneath her. The betrayal was overwhelming, more profound than she had anticipated. She closed her eyes tightly, trying to stave off the tears that threatened to overflow. But her efforts were in vain. The tears began to fall despite her best attempts to stop them. She needed a moment away from the intense scrutiny of Giorgio and the damning evidence laid before her. "Excuse me, I need to get away," she said, her voice breaking as she stood up from the table. Her steps were unsteady as she made her way to the bathroom, the hallway seeming to stretch endlessly in her disoriented state. Once inside the small, enclosed space, she sank onto the edge of the sink and allowed herself to cry with abandon. The sobs racked her body, each one a physical manifestation of the hurt and betrayal she felt. But after a few moments of emotional release, Viola pulled herself together. The tears ceased as abruptly as they had begun. She couldn't afford to remain in this vulnerable state. She needed to be strong, to take control of her life in the face of such treachery. As she looked in the bathroom mirror, her reflection showed a woman on the edge of despair, but also one who was resolute. The realization of the situation was clear. Her marriage was irrevocably over. It had ended the moment she saw those damning photos. Viola thought of Roberto, their fleeting but intense connection, and how he had looked at her with a warmth and recognition that Ciro had long since stopped showing. In the photos, Ciro's gaze was reserved for another woman, Alba, his boss's wife. Viola took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. She washed her face, carefully patting it dry with a handkerchief she retrieved from her purse. With a new resolve, she donned her sunglasses and a shield to hide her emotions and walked out of the bathroom. As she returned to the table, Giorgio glanced up, his eyebrows lifting slightly at her choice of eyewear. He said nothing, respecting her decision to conceal her feelings. All the documents are in the folder with details of various meetings. There is also information about Alba, and you haven't yet seen the photos from the hotel. They turned out to be quite interesting, Giorgio said, his tone matter-of-fact. Viola interrupted him before he could continue. Understood. Thank you for your help. I am very satisfied with your work. How much do I owe you? I have some cash with me, but I can also transfer the necessary amount to your card. Giorgio's gaze fell, his demeanor shifting slightly. I am also satisfied with my work. I've never managed to gather all the necessary information so quickly, and if you're still tuned into this video and find the story inspiring, drop a 5 in the comments to let me know you're still with me. You don't owe me anything. I did this for you without expecting payment. Don't ask for the reasons. There are a few, but I won't reveal them to you. I'm sorry. Everything I found and compiled in this folder, I've given to you, and I hope we don't meet again. My services are very expensive, but I'd rather not receive money from you. I hope you don't need any more services. Viola's straightforwardness seemed to surprise Giorgio. No, I won't need anything else. Soon, I'll be gone, leaving all this behind, she replied firmly, her voice steady despite the turmoil she felt inside. Giorgio raised an eyebrow, his curiosity piqued by her calm resolution. It was clear that she had accepted the circumstances with surprising composure and was ready to move forward. "Well, that was wonderful. Thank you. You've helped me a lot. I won't try to dissuade you from turning down the money. I see your decision is final. Good luck." "Goodbye," Giorgio said, his tone genuine. Viola gathered the papers and photos into the folder, her movements methodical. She stood up, giving Giorgio a final nod of acknowledgement before walking out. The detective watched her thoughtfully as she left, reflecting on the quiet strength she had shown despite the painful truths she had uncovered. Outside, Viola called a taxi. As she waited, her mind was already plotting her next steps. The anger and sense of betrayal were driving her towards a plan for revenge. The man she had loved and trusted had deceived her in the worst possible way. The decision to exact revenge came to her with clarity and a sense of purpose. She deserved happiness, and no one had the right to dictate her future but herself. When she arrived home, Ciro was there to greet her. "Where have you been?" he asked, his tone casual, as though nothing out of the ordinary had occurred. "I was busy with some errands," Viola replied, her voice even and controlled. "Why?" Ciro shrugged, nonchalantly. "Nothing. I'm going to work in my office and then I'll have to run some errands. I'll be back late." As Ciro settled in front of his computer, Viola's mind was already working on her revenge plan. She had carefully crafted her strategy, knowing exactly what she needed to do. When her husband finally left for work, she would set her plan into motion. In the bedroom, Viola retrieved the folder from Giorgio and examined the photos she had not yet seen. They were from the hotel, and she quickly scanned them, her stomach turning at the explicit evidence of Ciro's betrayal. She hastily placed them back in the folder, her disgust palpable. Amidst the documents, Viola noticed a small USB drive. She connected it to her laptop, discovering that it contained all the photos the detective had collected. This would make her task easier. A few hours later, as Ciro left the house, freshly showered and adorned with cologne, Viola observed his every move with keen interest. She noted his meticulous preparation, realizing he was heading to meet Alba. Viola's resolve was unwavering. The time had come to execute her plan and take control of her life. The betrayal had shattered her, but it also ignited a fierce determination to reclaim her happiness and assert her independence. After Ciro left for work, Viola moved with deliberate calmness into his office. The room was a stark contrast to the turmoil she felt inside, neat, organized, with an air of understated professionalism that had once been Ciro's pride. Viola sat at the desk, the chair creaking under her weight. She logged into Ciro's email account, a task that seemed oddly intimate now, but one she had done countless times before. She found a folder labeled Contacts, which contained the email addresses of all the clinic's employees, and her heart quickened. Among them was Emilio's address, a detail that seemed particularly satisfying. "Well, it's time to have some fun," Viola murmured to herself, a grim smile forming on her lips. She began uploading the photos of Alba and Ciro, photos from the hotel, the ones that so clearly depicted their betrayal. As she worked, a dark satisfaction grew within her. She wasn't content with merely sending the photos to the clinic staff. The scope of her revenge seemed to expand with each click. She decided to send the incriminating images to all of Ciro's contacts, anyone who might be able to cause him trouble. Each email sent felt like a small victory. Viola envisioned the chaos that would unfold, the ripple effect of her actions. It was done. She closed Ciro's email account and shut down the computer, her mind racing with the possibilities of the fallout. The house was quiet when Ciro returned 3 hours later, well past midnight. He didn't say anything to Viola, but the tension between them was palpable. The silence was thick with unspoken words. Viola didn't go to bed immediately. Instead, she sat in the kitchen, placing a chair by the window. The city lights outside flickered like distant stars, and she sipped her coffee slowly, savoring the warm bitterness. As she stared out at the night, her thoughts meandered through the events of the day and the future that lay ahead. Her life had taken a dramatic turn, and she was left to contemplate what came next. The next morning, Ciro left for work with an unusually anxious demeanor. Viola, now alone, waited with a mixture of anticipation and detachment. Half an hour after Ciro's departure, her phone rang. It was him. Viola, I'm in serious trouble. Ciro's voice was frantic, a stark contrast to the calm he usually displayed. What do you mean? Viola asked, trying to keep her voice steady. You can't even imagine what's happened. Ciro continued, his voice rising with desperation. Explain it to me. Ciro's panic was evident as he roared into the phone. Everyone received some strange photos that were retouched. Someone hacked my email and sent provocative images to all the employees of the clinic and beyond. My God, it's a nightmare. What's going on? Viola listened to the cacophony of his anguish without a trace of sympathy. When Ciro's voice dropped to a low, almost defeated murmur, she leaned in closer to the phone. It was me, Ciro admitted, his tone carrying a heavy burden of shame. What did you say? I didn't understand, Viola asked, her curiosity piqued. I said it was me, Ciro. I sent those photos. Viola stated loudly, her voice unwavering. And you know they are not fake. I know the whole truth, Ciro. Now you will pay for everything you have done. Ciro's response was a mix of anger and disbelief. In an instant, Abiola, what have you done? Idiot, where did you get those photos? Who the hell defamed me? Do you understand that all this is false? False. You are saying that it is a lie, as false as Alba being a doctor at the clinic. I know who she is, Emilio's wife. I only have 2 questions for you. Viola's voice was steady and filled with resolve. How could you bring your lover into our house? And why didn't you divorce me if you didn't need me anymore? If we had separated, none of this would have happened. But you lied to me shamelessly for several years. You slept with this young girl while I waited for you at home every day. You made a mockery of me. You said hurtful things. Once you were willing to have me in your hands. Why, when everything changed, did you not just talk to me? We could have separated amicably, but you betrayed my trust. You are a scoundrel, have always been, and I do not regret what I did at all. Let everyone know who you are. Most importantly, let Emilio find out. I think he will take care of you as you deserve. She ended the call abruptly. The phone line went dead, and Ciro was left listening to the dial tone. In a fit of rage, he hurled his phone against the wall. It shattered into several pieces, each fragment a testament to his crumbling control. He roared again, a guttural, wounded cry that resonated through the empty office. He slumped into his chair, burying his face in his hands, overwhelmed by the sudden turn of events. The day had begun with Ciro in high spirits, but his mood had quickly soured. His colleagues greeted him with cold stares and whispered conversations behind his back. Some didn't even bother with pleasantries. His assistant, Nora, looked at him with a mix of fear and pity. What happened today, Nora? I missed something interesting. Everyone is behaving strangely, Ciro asked, attempting to maintain a semblance of his usual jovial demeanor. Nora's response was hesitant and disjointed. It has been, I do not know what to say, and in general, I prefer not to participate in gossip. I'm leaving. Call me if you need anything. With that, she hurriedly exited the office, leaving Ciro alone with his mounting anxiety. Ciro's once orderly world had been turned upside down. The images that had been so carefully concealed were now public, and he was left to face the fallout of his actions. The betrayal he had inflicted on Viola had come back to haunt him with a vengeance, and he had no idea how he would salvage his reputation or repair the damage. As the day dragged on, Ciro struggled to maintain his composure. The hostile atmosphere in the office was a constant reminder of the personal disaster unfolding in his life. Each whisper and sidelong glance was a painful reminder of his humiliation and the stark reality of the consequences of his actions. Startled, Ciro shrugged his shoulders, trying to brush off the uneasy atmosphere that had settled over the clinic. "What's up with everyone today?" he muttered, trying to shake off his growing sense of dread. His attempts at normalcy were abruptly interrupted when Emilio stormed into his office half an hour later. Ciro's face brightened at the sight of his boss. He extended his hand for a handshake, his gesture filled with practiced politeness. However, instead of a handshake, he received a brutal punch to the face. The blow sent him stumbling backward, his eyes wide with shock. Emilio stood over him, eyes blazing with fury. "You think you can just walk around here as if nothing happened?" he roared. "You're a disgrace. I made you what you are. I trusted you, gave you patience and a lucrative income. And this is how you repay me? By sneaking around with my wife and trying to undermine everything I've built? You've humiliated me in front of everyone." Ciro's mind raced, piecing together the realization that Emilio had discovered the affair and was now intent on making him pay. If you're still tuned into this video and find the story inspiring, drop a 6 in the comments to let me know you're still with me. "You don't work here anymore?" Emilio continued, his voice low and menacing. "I did a favor to a friend by hiring you. I gave you everything, prestige, income, and respect. And you scum, you spat in my face. No one dares touch my wife, and you dared to lay a hand on her. Now you're nobody here. I'll ruin your reputation beyond repair. No one will want to work with you. I have the power to ensure you'll never work again. Your career is finished." Emilio's final words cut through the air like a knife. "Pack your things and get out. I don't want to see you here in an hour. If you stay any longer, I'll make sure everyone knows exactly who you are. Goodbye, Ciro." Emilio slammed the office door with such force that Ciro's certificate crashed to the floor. Ciro's heart pounded as he staggered to his desk and opened his laptop. His email was inundated with messages. His stomach churned as he clicked on one of the messages. There it was, the damning photos of him and Alba. The realization hit him like a tidal wave. His wife had orchestrated this cruel prank, and it had spiraled into a full-blown disaster. "This is a fiasco," Ciro whispered, his voice barely audible. He gathered his belongings with trembling hands, feeling the weight of his ruined life settling heavily upon him. The office was eerily silent. His colleagues, who had once admired him, now avoided him. The surgery scheduled for the day would be performed by someone else, likely one of his rivals. His career was in tatters, and he knew it was a bitter end to his professional journey. As he left the clinic, he felt the cold stares of his former colleagues, the absence of any farewells, and the indifference of those who had once been his peers. The familiar office, once a place of pride and accomplishment, had turned into a stark reminder of his downfall. Meanwhile, Viola was in the process of dismantling her life. She packed her belongings quickly, her movements precise and deliberate. She called a taxi, taking one last, contemplative look at the home she had shared with Ciro, a home now stripped of its warmth and joy. It would soon be occupied by someone else, perhaps a family that would find happiness in the place that had once been hers. Viola checked into a hotel, her new temporary refuge. She reached out to Teresa, her voice steady but resolute. "Teresa, it's over. I'm filing for divorce. I can't stay here anymore. Even more so now that I know the truth. I need the lawyer's contact information. I'm gonna start a new chapter in my life. Don't worry about me. I'm fine, better than ever. Just need to handle a few things, and then I'll fill you in on everything." Viola contacted her lawyer, making arrangements for the divorce proceedings. She signed a power of attorney, ensuring the process could move forward without Ciro's involvement. She had the financial means to support herself. Her account, filled with funds from Ciro's deposits, was more than sufficient to sustain her as she transitioned into her new life. With everything in motion, Viola dialed a familiar number. After several unsuccessful attempts, she tried one last time. On the third ring, the call was answered. "Hi, Roberto, it's me. Did you recognize my voice?" "Of course I did." Roberto's voice was warm and reassuring. "I'm calling to let you know that I'm filing for divorce. I'm leaving my husband. He betrayed me, and I can't stay here anymore. Is what you told me true? If so, I want to see you as soon as possible. I realize now how foolish I was. Forgive me, Roberto. I need you." As she spoke, a sense of relief began to wash over her. The tumultuous events of the past days were giving way to a new beginning, one that promised both challenges and opportunities. Ciro stood by the window of his now empty house, feeling the weight of his solitude pressing down on him. It had been a week since he last left the house, a week of quiet torment punctuated only by the persistent ringing of his landline. The phone had been a constant reminder of his downfall, a symbol of the life he once had but had now lost. In a fit of frustration, he had finally smashed the receiver, relishing the finality of the silence that followed. His new mobile phone, which had been on silent mode, was also inundated with missed calls and messages. Each message was a reminder of his current predicament, and he had only answered a few, each interaction marked by a sense of dread and resignation. The messages confirmed his worst fears. Viola had filed for divorce. The magnitude of his loss hit him harder with each new revelation. The day after the scandal erupted, Alba had called him, her voice shaking with distress. "He screamed on the phone," she had said. "Emilio kicked me out of the house. I can't believe it. I'm in shock. He took all the jewelry, everything of value. I have no money, no place to go. How could this happen? Someone must have been watching us. Emilio suspected something. Your wife must have found out about us." Ciro's response had been a mixture of anger and helplessness. "Your wife? Are you kidding me? She's a monster. She ruined my life. What am I supposed to do now? I have nothing. How am I going to live? This is a complete disgrace." Circus tried to calm his lover. "Calm down, Alba," he had said, though his words felt hollow. "Everything will be okay. Come to my house. My wife has left. She filed for divorce. You can stay with me." "Stay with you?" Alba's disbelief had been palpable. "Who are you? A doctor who can't even work anymore? You're nothing without Emilio. You're just a space. I don't want to be associated with you. You and your disgusting wife can both go to hell. I don't want to know about you anymore. Don't even say goodbye and never appear in my life again." The call had ended abruptly, leaving Ciro with a sinking feeling. He placed the phone gently on the table, trying to resist the urge to smash it, despite the anger and frustration that surged within him. The phone was new, and he knew that breaking it wouldn't solve anything. He was left with the harsh reality of his situation. No income, no direction, and no idea where to turn next. The days that followed were marked by an overwhelming sense of helplessness. He spent the next few weeks in a haze, unable to focus on anything other than his predicament. The once familiar comforts of his home now felt alien, and every corner seemed to echo the memories of his past life. Ciro's isolation grew deeper as he withdrew from the world, his only company being the relentless reminders of his downfall. One evening, as he stared out the window, he caught sight of the city lights shimmering in the distance. The view, once a source of inspiration, now seemed to mock his current state. He thought about the emails he had received, the messages from former colleagues, and the constant reminders of his failed career and personal life. His thoughts were interrupted by the ringing of his new mobile phone, but he ignored it, too overwhelmed to answer. A month had passed since Viola had left, and her absence was a void that Ciro couldn't fill. His once bustling home was now silent and empty, a stark contrast to the vibrant life he had once enjoyed. He had tried to reach out to old contacts and colleagues, but the responses were cold and dismissive. The scandal had effectively erased his reputation, and he was left with the bitter realization of how far he had fallen. Meanwhile, Viola was at the airport, her heart racing with a mix of excitement and apprehension. It was hard to believe that she was finally in Paris, a city she had only dreamed of visiting. The bustling terminal, the myriad of languages spoken around her, and the vibrant energy of the city all felt surreal. She looked around, her anticipation mingled with nervousness, as she waited for Roberto. In the crowd, she finally spotted Roberto approaching her. His presence was a beacon of hope in her new, uncertain life. He held a huge bouquet, his smile radiating warmth and affection. As he drew closer, Viola felt a surge of emotions: hope, relief, and a sense of new beginnings. "Well, hello, lady," Roberto greeted her, his eyes shining with genuine happiness. "I'm so glad to see you. I've been waiting for this moment, probably my whole life. May I take your hand? I'll show you Paris." Viola's heart swelled with emotion as she embraced him tightly, her head resting on his shoulder. "I've never been anywhere. I've never been to France. It feels like I'm home, Roberto." Roberto wrapped his arms around her, his voice a whisper in her ear. "You've never been anywhere? Then, my love, I'll gladly show you the whole world. We have our whole lives ahead of us." Viola clung to Roberto, feeling a profound sense of peace and belonging. The pain and betrayal of the past month seemed to melt away as she looked into his eyes. The city of Paris, with its rich history and romantic charm, now symbolized a fresh start, a new chapter in her life. As Roberto spoke of their future together, Viola felt a deep sense of certainty and hope. "Yes," she whispered, her voice filled with conviction. "It will be like this. We have a future together, and it's going to be wonderful. I believe that now more than ever." Roberto smiled and took her hand, leading her towards the exit. As they stepped out into the vibrant streets of Paris, Viola felt a renewed sense of purpose and excitement. The future, once uncertain and daunting, now seemed full of promise. With Roberto by her side and Paris as their backdrop, she was ready to embrace whatever came next. As we come to the end of this gripping journey, let's take a moment to reflect on what we've learned from the twists and turns of Ciro and Viola's story. From betrayal and personal downfall to new beginnings and hope, their experiences remind us of the complexities of relationships and the power of starting anew. What did you find most impactful about their journey? What lessons can you take from their story and apply to your own life? Share with us in the comments below one thing you've learned and how you plan to bring it into your daily practice. If you enjoyed this video and found it insightful, please leave your comment below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Your support helps us continue bringing you meaningful content. Thank you for watching, and we look forward to seeing you in our next video.